we have uncovered one of the most meaningful items that is a witness to one of the most dramatic events in the history of Jewish people.
For centuries, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem has stood at the center of history, faith, and controversy. It is one of the most sacred places on earth, revered by millions, and protected more fiercely than almost any archaeological site in existence.
The Temple Mount is sacred to three religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Yet beneath its ancient stones lies a mystery that has frustrated historians for generations. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the ruins of Petra, the Temple Mount cannot be freely excavated. No large-scale archaeological dig has ever been allowed to explore what rests beneath the sacred hill. For decades, that meant its deepest secrets remained hidden. But recently, researchers turned to a different kind of investigation.
An extraordinarily rare and extremely significant archaeological discovery has been unearthed in Jerusalem.
Using advanced scanning technology, artificial intelligence, historical maps, and evidence recovered from the mount itself, they attempted something once thought impossible. They tried to look beneath the Temple Mount without moving a single stone. What they discovered did not solve every mystery, but it offered the clearest glimpse yet into what may be hidden beneath one of the most contested religious sites on Earth. And it began with a question that has haunted Jerusalem for centuries. What is really beneath the Temple Mount? Forbidden ground, the mystery beneath the sacred hill. The Temple Mount, known to Muslims as Haram al-Sharif, is far more than a hill overlooking Jerusalem. For Jews, it is the holiest location in the world, traditionally associated with both the First Temple and the Second Temple. For Muslims, it is the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, and the place from which the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended during the night journey. For Christians, it remains deeply connected to the biblical history of Jerusalem and the events that shaped the ancient world. Few places carry such spiritual weight, and few places carry such sensitivity. For thousands of years, people have worshipped here, fought over it, defended it, and wondered what might still lie hidden beneath its surface. Yet despite centuries of curiosity, the ground itself has remained largely untouched. The reason is simple. Every layer beneath the mount sits at the intersection of religion, history, and politics. Any excavation, no matter how carefully planned, risks triggering controversy. That reality is not new. In the 19th century, a British officer and engineer named Charles Warren arrived in Jerusalem determined to learn more about the city's ancient past. Working with the Palestine Exploration Fund, Warren hoped to investigate structures connected to biblical Jerusalem. But even then, direct excavation on the Temple Mount was impossible. So he searched for another route. Armed with ropes, lanterns, notebooks, and surveying equipment, Warren descended into underground shafts, tunnels, and water systems surrounding the old city. His explorations revealed a hidden world beneath Jerusalem. Among his most famous discoveries was the vertical shaft that still bears his name today, Warren's Shaft. Some scholars have suggested that this feature may have played a role in ancient access routes into the city, possibly even during the era associated with King David. Whether that theory is correct or not, Warren's work proved something important. Jerusalem was layered with hidden passages and buried structures. The city possessed an underground history as fascinating as the monuments visible above ground. Yet even Warren reached a limit. The Temple Mount itself remained inaccessible. Religious authorities would not permit excavation. Political leaders saw the risks, and the sacred nature of the site made any disturbance unthinkable. More than a century later, that reality has barely changed. For many Jewish traditions, the exact location of the Holy of Holies, the most sacred chamber of the ancient temple, is unknown. Because no one can identify its precise position with certainty, some religious authorities discourage walking across parts of the mount itself. Excavation is viewed as even more problematic. From the Islamic perspective, the site is equally sacred. The Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock stand at the heart of a place honored by generations of worshippers. Any attempt to disturb the ground is often viewed as a threat to the site's sanctity. As a result, archaeologists face a challenge unlike any other. The world's most important historical questions may be hidden beneath the Temple Mount, but the traditional tools of archaeology cannot easily be used to answer them. The The difficulty extends beyond religion. It reaches into politics as well. Since the Six-Day War of 1967, the Temple Mount has existed under a delicate arrangement. Israeli authorities oversee security. The Islamic Waqf manages religious affairs on the site. The balance is fragile. Even minor changes can generate intense disagreement. In such an environment, archaeology becomes more than science. An inscription, a coin, a wall fragment, or a ceremonial object could influence debates about history, identity, and ownership. Every discovery carries consequences. That is why the Temple Mount is often described as archaeology's forbidden ground. Its secrets remain hidden not because no one wants to find them, but because finding them is extraordinarily complicated. For generations, historians believed those secrets might remain buried forever. Then, unexpectedly, an opportunity appeared. Not through excavation, not through a new tunnel, but through something that had been thrown away. The soil that spoke. For decades, the Temple Mount appeared impossible to study directly. The sacred hill remained closed to excavation, and with every passing year, many historians feared that valuable evidence might remain permanently out of reach. Then, an unexpected event changed everything. During construction work carried out on the Temple Mount in the late 1990s, large quantities of soil were removed from the site. The earth was transported away and dumped into the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem's Old City. To archaeologists, the news was devastating. The soil had come from one of the most historically significant locations on Earth, yet it had been removed without systematic archaeological examination. What may have contained centuries of history appeared lost. At least, that was the first impression. A small group of researchers soon recognized a remarkable opportunity. If they could not excavate the Temple Mount itself, perhaps they could study the material that had already been taken from it. That idea became the foundation of one of the most unusual archaeological projects ever attempted. In 2004, archaeologists Gabriel Barkay and Zaki Devira launched what became known as the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Rather than digging into the ground, they focused on examining soil that had already been removed. The process was simple but painstaking. Buckets of earth were spread across screens and washed with water. Volunteers carefully sifted through the remaining material, searching for even the smallest traces of the past. Every fragment mattered. A broken piece of pottery, a shard of glass, a bone fragment, a coin, a seal. Anything recovered was cataloged and studied. What made the project unique was that ordinary people could participate. Families, tourists, students, and local residents all joined the effort. People who had never imagined themselves involved in archaeology suddenly found themselves helping uncover the history of Jerusalem. Children discovered ancient objects hidden in the dirt. Visitors found artifacts that had not seen daylight in centuries. History became something people could hold in their hands. And the results exceeded almost every expectation. Over time, the project recovered more than 500,000 artifacts. Each discovery added another piece to the story of the Temple Mount. Some objects dated to the First Temple period. Others belonged to the Second Temple era. Many represented later civilizations that had occupied Jerusalem across the centuries. Broken pottery revealed evidence of daily life. Ancient oil lamps suggested domestic activity and religious practice. Fragments of ceremonial objects hinted at worship that had taken place long ago. Among the most significant discoveries were small clay seal impressions known as bullae. Several carried ancient Hebrew names, including names associated with priestly families mentioned in historical sources. These tiny objects provided direct connections to individuals who had once lived and worked in Jerusalem. Another remarkable find was a small ivory comb. Inscribed on its surface was one of the earliest known examples of Canaanite writing. The inscription itself was simple, referring to the removal of lice from hair, yet its importance was enormous. It offered a rare glimpse into everyday life and literacy thousands of years ago. Other discoveries included ritual-related objects such as bronze incense implements and ceremonial tools. Each artifact added detail to a picture that had once seemed impossible to reconstruct. What emerged was not evidence of a single civilization. Instead, it revealed continuous human activity spanning thousands of years. Israelite, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, Ottoman. The soil contained traces of them all. The Temple Mount was not an isolated monument frozen in time. It had been a living center of worship, administration, trade, and daily life across countless generations. The significance of the project went beyond the artifacts themselves. It demonstrated that even when traditional excavation is impossible, history can still be recovered. The mount remained untouched, yet its soil had begun telling its story. Researchers concluded that the recovered material supported a simple but important reality. The Temple Mount had been a place of extraordinary activity for centuries. The artifacts reflected multiple cultures, multiple faiths, and multiple eras layered upon one another. The site was not merely important to one community, it had become a crossroads of civilizations. Perhaps most importantly, the project transformed a seeming disaster into a breakthrough. Material that many believed had been lost forever was preserved and studied. 500,000 artifacts survived because someone decided that discarded soil was still worth examining. The lesson was powerful. Sometimes, history reveals itself in unexpected ways. Sometimes, the answers are hidden in places nobody thought to look. But even after hundreds of thousands of discoveries, the deepest mystery remained unsolved. The artifacts revealed what people had left behind. They did not reveal what still remained beneath the Temple Mount itself. And that question would soon lead researchers toward an entirely different kind of investigation, one that relied not on shovels or excavation, but on technology. Technology capable of looking beneath the ground without disturbing it. For the first time, scientists began asking a question that previous generations could not. If the Temple Mount could not be excavated, could it be scanned? Beneath the mount, the first glimpse below. For more than 100 years, archaeologists faced the same obstacle. They knew the Temple Mount concealed layers of history beneath its surface, but they had no practical way to investigate them. Excavation was restricted, new tunnels could not be opened. Traditional archaeology had reached its limits. Then, a different approach emerged. Between 2021 and 2024, researchers began combining advanced scanning methods with artificial intelligence and historical mapping data in an effort to study the subsurface features of the Temple Mount without disturbing the ground. The technology centered on ground-penetrating radar. By sending signals into the earth and analyzing the reflections that returned, scientists could generate images of structures hidden below the surface. The process worked somewhat like a medical scan. Instead of examining the human body, it examined layers of rock, soil, and buried architecture. On its own, the technology had limitations, but artificial intelligence offered a way to process enormous amounts of information more efficiently. Researchers could compare modern scans with historical surveys, including maps produced during the British Mandate period. Features recorded decades earlier could be compared against new digital models. Patterns that once appeared disconnected could suddenly be analyzed together. The results were intriguing. The scans identified a network of subsurface anomalies beneath portions of the Temple Mount. Some appeared as straight lines and angular formations inconsistent with natural geology. Others resembled corridors, chambers, or enclosed spaces. Several corresponded with features already known from historical records. This gave researchers confidence that the technology was successfully identifying genuine underground structures. More importantly, some anomalies appeared to represent spaces that had never been documented before. Potential chambers, possible passageways, voids hidden beneath centuries of construction. No one could say with certainty what these spaces contained. The scans could reveal shapes. They could suggest dimensions. They could identify structural patterns, but they could not provide direct visual confirmation. That distinction mattered. The technology was revealing possibilities, not opening doors. Still, the implications were significant. For the first time, researchers possessed a method for studying parts of the Temple Mount without excavation. No stones were moved, no walls were dismantled, no sacred ground was disturbed. Yet valuable information was beginning to emerge. The discoveries did not answer every question. In many ways, they created new ones. Some researchers suggested that certain anomalies might represent ancient water systems. Others pointed to evidence of tunnels, cisterns, and structural foundations constructed during different periods of Jerusalem's history. A number of features appeared consistent with the complex engineering projects that had transformed the hill across centuries. What became clear was that the underground landscape beneath the Temple Mount was far more complicated than many had imagined. Layer upon layer of construction seemed to exist beneath the visible surface. Different civilizations had left their mark. Different generations had modified what came before them. The result was a buried historical archive unlike any other. As researchers examined the data, they identified areas that deserved further study. Some anomalies appeared large enough to represent enclosed rooms. Others seemed connected by narrow passages. Several features raised questions about how different phases of construction on the mount may have interacted over time. Could some structures date to the Byzantine period? Could others be connected to earlier eras? Could certain foundations preserve evidence from periods that remain poorly understood? The scans alone could not provide definitive answers, but they demonstrated something important. The Temple Mount was not an empty mass of stone. It contained a complex, hidden landscape that still had stories to tell. As researchers continued comparing radar data with historical maps, one result kept appearing again and again. Several of the underground anomalies did not match any previously documented structures. They were not listed on modern surveys. They were not fully explained by known tunnels, cisterns, or recorded chambers. The scans pointed to something historians had not expected to see beneath the Temple Mount: a network of previously undocumented man-made spaces hidden below one of the most protected religious sites on Earth. Some appeared to be enclosed chambers. Others seemed connected by narrow passageways. Several were located in areas where access has been restricted for generations. Researchers could not enter them. They could not excavate them. They could only study the evidence through scans, historical records, and computer analysis. Yet the conclusion was difficult to ignore. Beneath the Temple Mount were structures that modern historians could see but could not fully explain. That realization became the true discovery. Not gold, not treasure, not a lost artifact, but evidence that parts of the underground landscape beneath the Temple Mount remain undocumented, even after centuries of study. For historians, that possibility was extraordinary. The Temple Mount is one of the most examined religious sites in human history, yet artificial intelligence and modern scanning technology suggested there may still be hidden spaces beneath it that nobody has properly investigated. That is why the scans generated so much attention. They did not solve the mystery of the Temple Mount. They proved the mystery is still alive. And for the first time in modern history, researchers have a way to look beneath the sacred hill without moving a single stone. What AI found beneath the Temple Mount was not a final answer. It was evidence that important questions still remain hidden underground. Questions historians are only beginning to explore.